I didn't kill her physically, but in the back of my mind, she died.
When word first hit the block that 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez's body was discovered all decomposed in David's Tesla, nobody believed him. But the feds just confirmed new evidence that clears David's name in the homicide case. And the new name they mentioned will change everything you thought you knew about this case. When the streets started talking and the evidence got real, here's what most folks missed while they were busy posting about David. The actual evidence tells a whole different story than what went viral on your timeline. Let me run this back to September 8th, 2025, when this whole situation kicked off. Workers at Hollywood Tow on North Mansfield Avenue started smelling something foul coming from a black 2023 Tesla Model 3 that had just been brought in a few days earlier. The car had been sitting abandoned in the Hollywood Hills for nearly 3 weeks to a whole month before it got towed. Just parked up on public streets in one of LA's most bougie neighborhoods where people don't usually let cars sit like that. When LAPD rolled up around 12:30 p.m. that day and popped open the front trunk, what Tesla owners call the frunk, they found severely decomposed human remains wrapped in a black plastic bag weighing about 71 pounds. The condition was so bad it took another 9 days, until September 17, 2025, for authorities to officially confirm the victim as Celeste Rivas Hernandez through dental records, DNA testing, and a distinctive shade tattoo on her right index finger. Now peep this. This is where the narrative gets real interesting and where paying attention to the facts becomes crucial. While the Tesla was definitely registered to David, the 20-year-old artist was actively on his world tour when the body was discovered, performing in cities all across North America. My man had been on the road for weeks, with documented performances and public appearances creating a verifiable timeline of where he was. Let's keep it real about Celeste herself, because her story is heartbreaking and complicated in ways that got lost in all the drama. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was reported missing on April 5, 2024, from her home in Lake Elsinore, California, when she was only 13 years old. But this wasn't her first time dipping out. She had run away multiple times throughout 2024, including on February 14th, March 15th, March 19th, and April 5th. What makes this especially relevant is that Riverside County Sheriff's deputies were called to her family's home 11 times between February 2024 and April 2025, mostly for minor crimes and suspicious circumstances. Her ex-boyfriend said she was dealing with a troubled home life, painting a picture of a young girl struggling with difficult circumstances that went way deeper than just one relationship or situation. The internet, of course, had already made up its mind before the facts were clear. Matching tattoos, suspicious, photos together. Guilty, a leaked song, supposedly titled Celeste, case closed, lock him up. But let's examine what law enforcement actually said, and more importantly, what they didn't say. LAPD Captain Scott M. Williams came out and explicitly stated, "We know for sure that Celeste Rivas Hernandez died, and someone placed her body in the front trunk area of David Burke's Tesla," but peep what he added, that it remains unclear whether there is any criminal culpability beyond someone concealing the body. This is crucial. After weeks of investigating, David has never been named a suspect, never been arrested, and has been fully cooperating with the authorities. His team confirmed to multiple news outlets that David has been informed about what happened, and although he's still out on tour, he is fully cooperating. Perhaps the most significant piece of information came from forensic experts analyzing the case. Dr. Amy Santoro, a forensic scientist and former CSI with a PhD, publicly stated that investigators believe Celeste's death resulted from a drug overdose based on preliminary autopsy findings showing no signs of trauma. Santoro noted that if toxicology confirms this theory, David would likely not face homicide charges, as the focus would shift away from intentional foul play. Think about what that really means. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office deferred the cause and manner of death, noting no pregnancy and significant decomposition that prevented them from immediately determining how she passed. Without a confirmed homicide classification, the case exists in a legal gray area that fundamentally challenges the murder narrative running wild on social media. Criminal defense attorney Alexandra Kazarian kept it blunt in a News Nation interview, straight up saying there was no evidence against David for any crime, despite all the circumstantial connections like the vehicle and the alleged relationship. She noted LAPD's cautious approach, holding back details because of insufficient information. Let's address the elephant in the room, the speculation about their relationship. Yes, Celeste's mother told TMZ that her daughter had mentioned dating someone named David. Yes, they appeared to share a tattoo. Yes, there were photos and alleged Discord messages floating around. But here's what gets overlooked when people gossip. David's manager, Josh Marshall, the one leasing that Hollywood Hills property where David sometimes stayed, stated he had zero knowledge of any events and worked remotely with minimal interaction with his client. The timeline itself presents major problems for people convinced David is guilty. The Tesla was abandoned in the Hollywood Hills for about 3 weeks before being towed around September 3, 2025. During this entire period, David was documented as being on tour, performing in multiple cities. Neighbors said the car had been sitting in the area since mid-August, well before anyone discovered what was inside. The decomposition of Celeste's remains, estimated at 2 to 4 weeks old when found, suggests she had been deceased for some time. This detail becomes critical when considering where David actually was and who else might have had access to his car. As the investigation kept pushing through September 2025, what became increasingly clear wasn't David's guilt, but the complexity of a case involving a troubled teenager, a car multiple people could access, and a cause of death that remained elusive to forensic experts. On September 17, 2025, LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division executed a search warrant at the Hollywood Hills rental home on the 1300 block of Daney Place, a property leased by David's manager Josh Marshall for $20,000 per month since February 2024. Detectives searched for blood evidence, checked drains, and seized electronics like a laptop for forensic analysis. But here's where it gets interesting. Just days after the raid on September 24, 2025, the lease was abruptly terminated and the entire spot cleared out. The homeowner, Miladin Trifunovic, confirmed Marshall contacted him, saying they were breaking the lease and leaving by week's end. He emphasized that when the lease was originally signed in February 2024, everything was normal and there were no issues. This sudden exit fuels speculation online, with many people interpreting it as evidence that someone has something to hide. But consider the alternative explanation. When your client's home gets raided in connection with a high-profile death investigation and the media circus camps outside, living there becomes impossible, regardless of innocence or guilt. The property had external security cameras that could potentially provide evidence, though the owner said he couldn't access footage without tenant permission or a warrant. Here's the key. Forensic science has limits. The advanced decomposition of Celeste's remains, her body weight dropped to 71 pounds due to decay, made the investigation far more complicated. Forensic expert Amy Santoro explained that investigators suspect a drug overdose based on autopsy results showing no trauma. If confirmed, this would fundamentally shift the case from murder to a tragic accidental death.
Michael, a situation that you actually caught us up on last week involving the pop singer David and Celeste Rivas, who's this 17-year-old, and her body was discovered, if memory serves, in the trunk of a Tesla that was found in a rental car lot in California.
Yeah, and even more tragic, she was 15 now, and when she went missing, she was only 13 years old. She went missing in April of 2024.
The absence of trauma is significant as hell, fam. In cases where somebody gets murdered violently, bodies typically show evidence of how they died. Strangulation leaves marks on the neck. Blunt force trauma leaves fractures. Stabbing or shooting leaves characteristic wounds. The lack of such evidence, combined with the deferred determination of cause of death pending toxicology, suggests a scenario very different from the violent murder many folks assume went down. Consider Celeste's background more carefully because it matters. She had a documented history of running away with sheriff's deputies pulling up to her family's spot 11 times in 13 months for disturbances and minor crimes. Community members in Lake Elsinore noted she had run away at least 3 times in 2024, often leaving notes or being spotted near vehicles. Her ex-boyfriend described family tensions in a troubled home environment. This pattern of behavior is crucial to understanding potential alternative scenarios. No cap, a teenager repeatedly bouncing from difficult home circumstances might seek refuge with different people, might make risky decisions, might end up in dangerous situations involving drugs or other hazards, all without any single individual being responsible for a premeditated murder. You feel me? Private investigator reports suggested that back in 2024, relatives supposedly emailed David's management about Celeste's disappearance, and she came home the next day, possibly suggesting some kind of intervention went down. However, Marshall denied receiving such emails, highlighting how difficult it becomes to separate verified facts from speculation and hearsay. The online speculation reached peak levels with people analyzing David's music like it was evidence. His song Romantic Homicide with bars like "In the back of my mind you die, and I didn't even cry." No, not a single tear got re-examined as potentially prophetic like he was confessing. But as David himself explained in a Genius interview,
So what inspired the hook, "In the back of my mind you died," is kind of like the storytelling aspect of the lyrics that came before it, in a way that it builds up to the big moment where she died in the back of my mind. Like, I didn't kill her physically, but in the back of my mind, she died. And I didn't even cry, not a single tear. I've seen people online take different meanings and interpretations from that one part of the song where it's like it's their past selves that's dying. And they're not even crying about it because they're evolved or become better people or have killed addictions and other different stuff like that. So I think it's very powerful.
the song dropped in July 2022, way before Celeste went missing. Claims that it dropped on her birthday were thoroughly debunked, yet they kept circulating on social media as so-called evidence. Professional consequences came down hard on David regardless of what the facts actually showed. He canceled his remaining tour dates, including shows in Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Brands like Crocs and Hollister pulled their collaborations. His music got deprioritized on streaming platforms, and his whole career trajectory shifted significantly. Some folks defended him, though. Streamers Jason Lewine and Lig chopped it up about the situation.
But was she still really missing without a trace all that time? The other day, TMZ acquired some video of Celeste in her parents' backyard, and it was dated September 8th, 2024. That date is so significant for a couple of reasons. First off, it's 5 months after she supposedly disappeared for the last time. And what's more sad is that it is one day after her 14th birthday, which makes me think maybe Celeste came home for her birthday. Her birthday's on September 7th. This video's on September 8th.
But even these defenses got complicated, fam. Jason initially said David didn't do it and wasn't a murderer, only to catch heat when more circumstantial details came out. Fellow streamer Rain later defended Jason's initial stance, arguing that having your homies back before hard evidence emerges is understandable, though he noted that continuing to defend him after evidence appears would be problematic. The Tesla itself became a major focal point. These whips are equipped with Sentry Mode cameras and extensive data logging. Former TV personality academics noted that if David was responsible, it would be remarkably foolish to commit such a crime in a vehicle that records everything, suggesting the case should be pretty easy for cops to solve given the forensic capabilities of modern electric vehicles. Now let's talk about the real truth emerging and what it all means. As we move into late September and October 2025, a clearer picture starts to form, one that's way different from the premeditated murder narrative dominating early coverage in the streets. The evidence increasingly points toward a tragedy involving a vulnerable teenager, substance abuse, and a series of circumstances that, while certainly suspicious in their details, may not constitute the criminal homicide many folks assume went down. Forensic scientist Amy Santoro's repeated statements that investigators believe Celeste died from a drug overdose represent perhaps the most significant development in understanding this entire situation. In multiple social media posts analyzed from early October 2025, Santoro broke it down. If toxicology confirms overdose as the cause of death, David would likely avoid homicide charges entirely, as the death might stem from self-inflicted or accidental means amid Celeste's documented risky behaviors. This theory lines up with several key facts. Real talk. The absence of trauma noted in preliminary autopsy findings. Celeste's history of running away and seeking refuge in different spots. The complexity of determining cause of death in severely decomposed remains. The deferred classification by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner takes on new significance in this context, not as some delay tactic, but as an acknowledgement of genuine scientific uncertainty. Let's consider what we know about the whip itself, fam. Multiple sources confirm that David owned several vehicles and that the Tesla was accessible to various people. The car had been sitting abandoned for weeks, during which time David was verifiably on tour performing in cities across North America. The timeline of decomposition suggested Celeste had been deceased for several weeks before discovery, a period that overlapped with David's documented absences from LA. This raises crucial questions, no cap. If David wasn't physically present when Celeste died, and if her death resulted from a drug overdose rather than violence, what exactly is the nature of any potential culpability? Is it possible Shorty died at a location where David had stayed, and others, perhaps trying to avoid scrutiny or legal consequences, placed her body in his whip knowing he was away on tour? Is it possible she used the vehicle herself, or with some people she was rolling with and tragedy struck without David's knowledge? LAPD Captain Scott M. Williams' careful statement that someone placed her body in the front trunk of David Burke's Tesla, but that it remains unclear whether there is any criminal culpability beyond body concealment, starts making more sense in this context. The act of concealing a body is itself a crime, but it's fundamentally different from causing the death. You feel me? The timing coincidence that emerged through surveillance footage showing Celeste in her parents' backyard on September 8, 2024, exactly 1 year before her body was discovered, adds another layer of complexity to the whole situation. This footage, dated 5 months after she was supposedly missing for the last time, revealed that Celeste's disappearances were more sporadic and her situation more fluid than initially understood. She had apparently returned home periodically, including potentially for her 14th birthday on September 7, 2024. Ashley Banfield's coverage on Drop Dead series highlighted how police got called to Celeste's family spot 11 times in just over a year, with 3 separate visits on March 19, 2024 alone. That was the same day Celeste got caught on liquor store surveillance running down the street. These details paint the picture of a teenager in crisis, cycling through disappearances and returns, living in circumstances that repeatedly had law enforcement pulling up. The investigation also revealed complexities in Celeste's family situation. BAM! Reports initially suggested her parents might be undocumented immigrants who had bounced from the country, but exclusive records obtained by News Nation show both parents were in the United States legally, having received Social Security numbers around 2001. A former neighbor who lived in public housing with the family from 2019 to 2020 reported occasionally hearing the parents beefing about custody of their children, though there was no indication of divorce. What emerges is a portrait of a troubled family system, a young girl seeking escape, and a tragic outcome that may have resulted from the cumulative effect of these circumstances rather than any single villainous act. This doesn't diminish the tragedy. If anything, it makes it more heartbreaking. Real talk, Celeste Rivas Hernandez deserved better than the circumstances she found herself in, regardless of how those circumstances came to be. The legal implications of the drug overdose theory are profound. Without a homicide classification, prosecutors would face major challenges bringing murder charges against anyone. Former prosecutors noted that while arrests are possible even without a precise cause of death, the absence of evidence of foul play makes it difficult to proceed. The concealment of the body itself could lead to charges, but determining who's responsible for that concealment, particularly when multiple people may have had access to the vehicle, presents its own challenges. David has maintained through his representatives that he had no knowledge of anything foul happening and has been cooperating fully with authorities. The online speculation about grooming, given Celeste's age, remains a separate concern that the streets have been talking about. Discord messages allegedly showing communication between a user named Celeste and David dating back to 2022 raise questions about the nature and timeline of their connection. However, authorities haven't confirmed the authenticity of these messages or brought charges related to statutory rape or exploitation. California's statutory rape laws would certainly apply if a sexual relationship occurred between David, age 20, and Celeste, age 15 during the relevant period. But proving such a relationship beyond screenshots and speculation would require substantial evidence. As of late October 2025, no such charges had been filed. So what does this all mean for David's future, fam? The absence of criminal charges doesn't erase the professional damage he suffered. His tour remains canceled, brand partnerships dissolved, and his reputation took a major hit. Even if he eventually gets cleared of all criminal wrongdoing, the association with this tragedy will likely follow him throughout his whole career. No cap. But here's what we really got to grapple with as a society, real talk. The rush to judgment based on circumstantial evidence, social media speculation, and the human tendency to want clear villains in complex tragedies. Legal experts like Alexander Kaisarian emphasize that despite the circumstantial links, there was no evidence against this man for any crime. LAPD's careful public statements consistently avoided naming David as a suspect, suggesting investigators recognized from early on that the evidence didn't support the narrative many folks assumed The tragedy of Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death remains regardless of who may or may not bear legal responsibility, fam. A 15-year-old girl who repeatedly sought escape from difficult circumstances ended up dead, her body abandoned in a vehicle. Her family grieves, having launched a GoFundMe for funeral costs and memorial services. Community members in Lake Elsinore held vigils, describing her as a sweet child who deserved better. As we await final toxicology reports and any potential charging decisions from prosecutors, what's become clear is that the actual evidence in this case, the forensic findings, the timelines, the investigative facts, paints a far more complex and ambiguous picture than the murder narrative that went viral on everybody's timeline. Dr. Amy Santoro's assessment that we are weeks away from any charges suggests that even if charges eventually materialize, they may be way different from what many folks expected. The lesson here extends beyond this single case. Real talk, in an era of instant communication and social media justice, we've got to resist the urge to convict based on circumstantial connections and suspicious coincidences. The American legal system, for all its flaws and the way it's historically treated people in the hood, operates on the principle of innocent until proven guilty precisely because human judgment is fallible and circumstantial evidence can mislead. When we abandon that principle in the court of public opinion, we risk destroying lives based on incomplete information and speculative connections. The coroner's report remains the key to understanding what truly went down. Until those toxicology results are finalized and analyzed, much of what's been presented as fact remains conjecture. The difference between a tragic accidental death and a calculated murder isn't just semantic, it's the difference between understanding this as a systemic failure involving a vulnerable youth and seeing it as the work of a singular perpetrator. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.